David Crowder this semester's Hearn Innovator in Christian Music. The Hearn Innovators in Christian Music series is made possible by a generous endowment from Billy Ray Hearn, Baylor Church Music graduate and the early developer of what has become known as the contemporary Christian music movement. It is Mr. Hearn's dream that we would bring musicians to the Baylor campus who are plowing new ground and exploring new territories. This short residency allows the innovator to interact with students in small group settings, in classes, and in larger group interactions, such as this time this afternoon. David Crowder is no stranger to Waco. He helped to found the University Baptist Church here in 1995. However, David is also impacting the world outside Waco through the David Crowder Band and its ministry. When we planned David's time at Baylor well over a year ago, we had no idea that it would coincide with the release of his new album, Church Music. His fifth album will be officially released on September 22nd. However, the group is releasing a single every Tuesday until the full release on the 22nd. And since today's a Tuesday, today the release of the fourth single, Shadow, took place. At this point, I'll stop telling you about stuff that you should know more about than I, and make a few personal comments. I've gotten to know David through his service on the Board of Advisors for the Center for Christian Music Studies. This group is made up of people who serve the church through local church ministry, through publishing, through writing, through playing, and much more. David has earned his place around the table in this group, not just because he's doing more than most of us, but also because he's genuinely interested in what is best for the kingdom of God. He listens intensely to all the discussions that transpire, and he offers gentle words of wisdom when needed. He has inspired me with his curiosity about things that are new to him. To see a budding friendship develop between David Crowder and Dr. Al Travis, the retired organ professor at Southwestern Seminary, or with Cassandra Northcutt, who's the person who gave the money for the endowment of the Northcutt Lecture, is truly a picture of what the music of the church should engender. Actually, not just the music, but what the church itself should engender. Friends, the fall of 2009, Hearn Innovator in Christian Music, David Crowder.
Thank you guys. That was very generous as far as words go. That was incredibly kind. And I'm quite embarrassed now. And in fact, I learned stuff. I did not realize it was Tuesday, nor did I realize that we had a song release, so this is great. I don't do this, what's happening currently. In fact, as I have some moral support in the back there, they know that this is terrifying for me. I'm much more comfortable behind an instrument or a microphone singing songs or talking in one-on-one settings, and so moments like this are just horrifically. The deal, I say this every so often when I'm forced into a moment like that. I did well. I'm again very, very grateful, but I tend to say the problem is my mouth works like because of my head, and so what comes out we all hear for the first time, which is not it's not a gift to look for in professional orators. But in talking about what I would be required to do, what would be beneficial to you guys, it was really suggested that just get up and talk about what you're thinking about, what you guys are doing, what's going on inside of your head when you're looking at composing the stuff that you're composing. So I just thought I'd do that. The previous season that we've been in, the things I've been thinking about. Sorry, hey, hello, I'm David.
You don't mind us.
Yeah. We missed all the good stuff. Now we're from here. So
we're late because we were catching your Twitter video on YouTube. So.
Oh, well, then you're definitely just going to be let down. But what we've been thinking about as a band and talked about is order and chaos, the limited and then limitlessness of things. Maybe I should say, actually, I should probably say order and perceived chaos, limited and the limitless. Good sound versus bad sound. Is there such a thing as good sound? Is there such a thing as bad sound. And so to maybe talk about this, and I really want to get through this stuff quick so we get to the question and answers, because I'll be more comfortable, and so will you, instead of watching me jump around nervous like. So let's start here. I'll try to get through this stuff quick, and maybe what I'd like to, by the end of what I'm doing here at the first, let you know what I feel like church music's purpose is, what I think church music does well and can do well. So here, we'll start this with this. It's actually not random. This is a right triangle. Use your imagination. That's what this is. That is horrific. Okay. And here's what we'll do. We'll call this 3. We'll call this 4. Can somebody tell me what the length of the hypotenuse is? You got, this is, I'm going to call your parents. Actually, and this is really beautiful, I think. And this is, as we know, this is brought to us by Pythagoras. And, the one bit of information that has stuck with us from our early education. How in the world they got that implanted? If we could figure out that, we could solve the educational crisis, I'm confident. Because that is with us for life, the Pythagorean theorem. So here's what's going on. There's a lot of mystique and misinformation around Pythagoras and his little math club, Pythagoreans. But here's what it boils down to. Basically, they're a pretty awesome math club with cult-like tendencies, right? Like such as carving pentagrams on their person and such. That's weird, right? So they're sitting around their little secret lair, talking about their little math things and carving on themselves. And they're not letting you in because you won't carve on yourself. So that's pretty cool. But what they thought they believed everything was numbered, right? You guys are probably really familiar with this. This is somewhat redundant, but they believed everything was numbered. That beauty could be assigned to mathematics. It could be explained through mathematical equations, right? That's a bizarre line of thinking. But here is something that reaffirms that belief. Here you have beauty pulled from what might be a disorder. You have the seemingly limited or limitless limited. And this isn't something that they created. This isn't something that they can change. This just is. And for them, it's beautiful. It reaffirms what they believe, right? And so, and also, one of the first natural laws for mathematics comes from these guys as well, which has to do with music, which is fitting since we're here together in the same room, and you're probably more familiar with this. But these guys noticed while they're walking around that when some people would play the lyre, it was very beautiful and pleasing. That was very beautiful and pleasing. Other people would play it, and it was less than this, right? It would provoke maybe feelings of nausea, and so they thought we can explain this with math. If everything's everything's numbered, if we can pull beauty from the chaos mathematically, well, we can do this as well. So they built they built the little experimental one-string lyre, and sure enough, we're able to do this. So they've got the string, they pluck it, you've got your fundamental tone, they divide it in 2 perfectly. That's exactly halfway there, I'm certain. Plugging it in, obviously you've got your octave sounding above it. They divide again, you got your 4th, they divide again, you get your 5th. So beauty, all of a sudden, is pulled from the seemingly limitless, right? Order is pulled from potential chaos or perceived chaos. The entire range of frequency of sound is in front of us, and all of a sudden we can assign a ratio of 2 to 1 to something. That's really beautiful, right? And here again, not something that they created, not something they can change. It just is, and it's beautiful, and it reaffirms what they believed initially. And so we'll come back to this maybe. Jump to, because this will be helpful maybe when I wrap up. I don't know what I'm doing, so I'm sorry. Jump to church history, and specifically music within the church. And I'd rather talk about the music of the Christian church, but we jump to the beginning. The guy who is credited with the invention of the first instrument, Jubal, this guy, a descendant of Cain, evil son, Adam and Eve, right? Dark arts we're talking about here. I would prefer to go against, there's a lot we could look at in Hebrew life in terms of music and what that might say to us now, but like I said, I'd rather jump to the Christian church. And Paul's the first guy talking about after the death, resurrection of Christ. He's the first guy that gives us any sort of hint at maybe what we're to be about, right? And he's pretty, to be almost profane, he's pretty useless, right? I mean, let us encourage one another with the singing of spiritual songs. I mean, what happens when they're discouraging? That's what I keep thinking. Because if it's anything like, it's like my church, early church, it's like my church, we would get to that question really quickly. What is this discouraging, Paul? So useless. I'll jump outside. The first, I think, impression that we have from someone outside of the Christian church would be Pliny the Younger, right? Roman statesman, right? And wrote a series of letters that gave a good bit of insight into Roman life and law in the 1st and 2nd century. And here's what he says when he's trying to talk to Emperor Trajan about these Christians who he's having trouble with, and he's trying to describe them. So he says, here's how he defines us. He says, they rise early before dawn to sing songs to Christ as if to a God. Now this, for him, is strange, right? It's a bizarre notion. We will sing to God and He will hear us. That, if you can be a bit objective, that's a very strange notion. Strange then, strange now. And I think that to make note of that as a first observation of the early church, that should be significant and enlightening as well. Then we could jump to Clement of Alexandria, and I want us to look at maybe how contentious our history has been, is where I'm kind of going with this. But so Clement of Alexandria, he comes along. He's comparing orgies of the heathen with the chaste celebrations of Christians, right? And he, in so doing, he's trying to call the readers to purity, restraint, nobility in their singing. And he says, let's leave the over-colorful melodies to those lascivious orgy throwers, right? So that means to me there must have been something he's reacting against already. Here really early on in the history of music within the church, there's something happening. He feels like we need to pull back a little. We need some order and restraint here. Tertullian followed, and that was actually in the instructor. In Tertullian, he has in his treatise the apology, which is fitting, I think, in marrying these two guys. That it's almost a direct response to what Clement's saying, and he says this. He says, now listen, when we get together in our gatherings, there's only a moderate amount of drinking going on. He's trying to, and as proof, here's what goes down. Like, every time we gather, someone comes to the center and sings a song of encouraging song. And this would not be possible if there were anything more than a moderate amount of drinking, Which I think actually illuminates more Tertullian's view of moderation than it does anything else. At least it's generous enough for a pub crawl or Dave Matthews concert, you know what I'm saying? But again, there's something that he is reacting against, and something that's causing him, and maybe for him at that time, there's this felt encroachment of order. I don't know. Jump to St. Augustine, and he's much more even-handed, I think. Granted, he seems to struggle with emotion quite a bit, but in Confessions, he's actually trying to offer a bit of defense to the Adventist Church in North Africa. They're getting flack because they apparently are quite rowdy when they get together, right? Get a little wound up, but his criticism is sort of like passive aggressive in a sense. He's really clever in the way he phrases it. He says, now, yes, they're really rowdy. They use colloquial language. They write with absolutely no care or concern for the historical church, unlike us, where we are much more noble and refined. But hey, when we get together, isn't it reason enough for song to burst forth? unless the pastor's talking or a deacon's praying, those are his words, not mine. So, which is reasonable. But so he again is trying to say there's this chaotic thing. There's this movement over here that we are unnerved by, and there's this want for restraint. And so there's and then I mean there's so many moments. Polyphony, oh my word, that was a big one, right? Polyphony arrives, the world bursts into song like a Coke commercial or something, and we're like, oh no, that is way too licentious and loose, and but then eventually we capitulate and embrace. We'll move to thirds and fifths, and everybody else is going to fourths and sixths, and no, that's too licentious and loose, and eventually we capitulate. And Pope banning an interval in 1324. There's just to me that means that there's movement along our way, contention being a part of it, and then there's also what I think you see the same things that are going on in the church happening in the popular culture of each time. The stuff that's being fought over in the church seems to be exactly mirrored in what's going on outside in other fields. When there's a movement towards the chaotic, there's this want for restraint and order. And what that means to me, so what I'd like to say is, I feel like where we are currently is, and this might sound a little counterintuitive, seeing as the recent contentiousness of our traditional versus contemporary services that you guys are probably very familiar with. But I really feel like we're in a moment of order. And the reason I say that, a couple of reasons, because I feel like the contemporary movement was really nothing more than an embrace of pop music. And we've gotten to talk about this a little bit here and there with some of you guys in our interactions. This has come up, and here's why I say that. So back to here, and pop music to me, I guess I should put this out there first. Pop music to me is sort of the lowest common denominator of what's happened, right? I say that with the utmost appreciation of pop music. Lil Wayne, I think. You know what I'm saying? So, yeah, it's really the low. It's popular because pop music is popular. It is the common language that we hold and have, and the thing that stirs us. Yet we know, and we can, especially folks that are new with music theory and the progress of music and how it's developed, that we know that it's just really, really simple. In fact, you can look right here and go, you're 1-4-5. This is the chord. This is the fundamental chord structure for pop music. It can't get more simple or foundational than these chords, right? So what that tells me then is that we must, as a culture, be really in need for something to hold. We must be really wanting order, because it can't get much more orderly than this, right? And that makes a lot of sense, since what we've had happen in the not too, we've had this move from modernity that we've all probably been in conversation about and trying to get our heads around. How are we to be people of faith in this new age? You've got a shift from Newtonian physics to quantum physics. You've got ontological uncertainty undermined, and now everything feels chaotic. So doesn't it then make sense that there would be this cultural want for order? And that's sort of what we get with pop music, right? And so here is what I would like to kind of end up on, and hopefully this will just stir. What I'm trying to do is just stir some thoughts, and we can get to some of the Q&A stuff. But here's what I want to end up. So we're going to go with another. Is that close? Oh, that's just okay. This is a right angle too. This is another right triangle. It's just pathetic. We'll go 3. We'll go 3. Can someone please tell me the hypotenuse length?
2 times area 3. Yeah. 3 times area 2.
What would that be?
have no clue.
Okay, this drove Pythagoras crazy, did it not? Like, you, with whole numbers and fractions, you ain't going to get the square of 18, okay? And so they're looking at this, again, not something that they created, not something they can change. It just is, and this is maddening, right? Without irrational numbers, you're just not going to get there. And so here's what I feel like that the music of the church is for, what its purpose is, what it can be really good at, what its future is, what its past has been. I think that the music of the church is this line right here. I think what it does well and what it can potentially do is reconcile order and perceive chaos. That it can point to the chaotic, that it can point to the limitlessness of things, that it can point to the irrationality of where we are, what our existence is, and at the same time, and well, hopefully even in the process, point to the most irrational thing of all, which is grace. The thing I hope and pray that in the process, looking back and seeing all the contentious nature of our movement, that what's ahead of us, we would still be known and defined in really simple terms, just as people who sing to Christ as if to a God. And if that's the case, I think we're okay, right? So anyway, that's my little spiel. What's been up here and we've been chatting about for a bit of time, and what's helped shape where we're going and what we're doing. And I would love to talk more about it or any other questions that have come to mind and that we haven't covered in our, some of you guys that we got to hang out with a little bit. If anything's come from those conversations, I'm happy to answer those questions. Well, great. I'm glad. I thought it was pretty clear, so that's good. Now, there's always this lull, right? I don't know. So, yeah, we'll see if we can break the ice and then we'll be off and running. Sure. Yes.
So, I'm going to say something. What I think that you're aiming to do is like with your music and the church, and it's using foundational and simple and very cultural terms of pop and contemporary music, but in it, it still has the divine, and you're explaining, you're talking about grace, and you're praising the irrational and having faith in what's unseen. Is that, would you say that's exactly what you're trying to do?
Yes. I think the thing that we struggle most in doing is trying to use, and again, I apologize if this is redundant for any of us that have been in conversations for the past couple of days, but is the pop song is just so hard to use to say these grand things, right? And so we're trying to not lose people in the process of sort of demolishing the pop song. I think even our song structures at times we're very intentional in trying to not just follow what your typical pop song model would be, and hopefully that brings surprises. Yet it also, for a lot of people, brings a bit of discomfort. Some people are really excited about that, other people are not. And in doing that, we feel like we're able to expand expectation and as well, hopefully bring a little more thoughtfulness to their interaction with the music. And so I think if you make it a little bit difficult, you have to at least cause some sort of thought to occur. But yeah, the ideas presented are no less than grace and hopefully an encounter with the divine in the process, allowing people to articulate the encounter. Yes?
I have two questions. I guess the answer to the first question will go with the second question, but
You're leading me.
pardon?
So you're leading me. Yeah, you set me up.
Do you see your music as primarily, when you write your music, do you intend it to be for the church or broader than, the people of God called the church? And if you do see it for the church, kind of looking at the broader perspective of worship, we could limit it to America, not our kids here, but kind of looking at worship in America, want your music to feel in kind of the broader realm of church music in America? Kind of what role or niche do you want your music to kind of be in?
Okay. To the first part of that, it is what I think about what we're doing in simple terms, in that we're at a specific community here in Waco, Texas. We're with a specific group of people here in Waco, Texas. And what our role there is to just help that group of people say things to God. Also, there's when you present something in front of people, there's a teaching moment there too. They're learning things. Oh, sorry.
Well, I said when you write, you actually think of your
Yes.
in mind. It's not really
Correct. Now there is an awareness because there's an awareness that's grown in me as the platform has sort of increased as we've gone. But I get really confused thinking about that side of it. And it seems like the reason this other platform has grown to begin with is because there's something that is being attached to because of what we're doing here. So if I then just keep my focus to be, how do I help our group of people say things to God in ways that are feel like that they're rediscovering things that we have to keep busy. It's sort of, you have to tell the same story over and over, and how do we tell it over and over in a way that's somewhat compelling. But these are the people that I have in mind when we're doing that. Now, as we have gotten further into the thing, I realize that there is this responsibility that looms out there, but I'm afraid to kind of take my eyes off the stuff that I feel and know that feels like I understand. This other side of things, I don't necessarily understand that much, and I know that I do have a function and a role there, but the reason that function and role exists is because of my attempt to articulate faith for this particular group of people. So I hate to change or adjust that to accommodate something out here that I don't really get necessarily. Right? Is that helpful at all? No, I didn't. Yes. Also, the times that we've been most excited about what's happened out here has been when people outside of the church have sort of raised their head up and what's going on with this thing? Because it's really strange to have a band that leads worship in a church every week go tour a lot of clubs and rock and roll venues that mainstream artists and mainstream journalists pay attention to, and they've never heard of our music or our name before, and then you're on the phone with them trying to explain what you do, what it is that this thing is. So that's when I've gotten really excited, but there's been no intentionality to connect that person who's outside of the church, outside of how I view our people at UBC. Because UBC, as you guys know, being around town, is a unique group of folks. They have a lot of issues with church culture, and so we're trying to say things in a way that helps them set some of their baggage down, or doesn't pile on more baggage. And for whatever reason, that is also similar vantage points where people that are outside of the church are coming from. I think why our music might be a little more accessible than other church worship songs. Would be my guess. Yeah. Yeah, man.
Recently, in churches, we're talking about the contemporary traditional.
Yeah.
A lot of that being generational things. In our lifetime, we have people born in the 40s who never heard rock, never grew up with rock music as much, maybe in a religious home or whatever. Do you see that persisting to the same degree, that conflict of traditional versus contemporary, or with people growing up in an era where media is everything and our understanding of things is so media saturated that do you see the conflict lessening or great making being more?
Well, yeah, I would think different would be the better. Because the thing I would love to answer that in a very positive way, but I know looking backwards, I know there's more contention ahead of us. That's one thing we could probably predict with absolute certainty. What it will be exactly, who knows? But we were talking about this at lunch, actually. I feel like you're on to something really significant, that the younger generations have less hang-ups. They're much more willing to appreciate a broader range of expression You know, there's this, and in fact, at times they feel constrained if they're only getting one kind of expression. You know, so I think that's very different than, hey, I need you to communicate in my language, and I'm not feeling what you're sending out right now. You know, to put the David Crowder Band in front of a very traditional older group of people would not be, it would not provoke the things that we would hope to provoke, you know. Whereas I believe younger generations can appreciate the depth that exists in hymns, the depth that exists in orchestral music. There's this appreciation that is already inherent because their exposure to so much is a lot more diverse and broad. You have follow-up?
Yeah, I was just going to follow up real quick. One thing I noticed that is main issue between traditional and contemporary is the musical thing, like this, the rhythmic sense. And there's just a different, a large shift in music style that I'm wondering that is playing, that is adding to the contention. Will that style, is there something in the music maybe that you see in contemporary music that will eventually become so natural to everyone that will have generations of people being intuitively understanding more rhythmic music and rock music styles? Is that going to glaze over some of the issues, or is that just going to just create more issues?
Well, this would be a great example of how I feel like when we start talking about church music, we're really talking about culture. Multiculturalism versus, ubiquitous human that's the same, these are big thoughts that a lot of people from a lot of angles are trying to figure out. What's even best? Is it best that things are glazed over and now the authentic expression is just an amalgam of a lot of different ideas and thoughts and sounds, or is it best that the culture offers the depth of its culture that makes that person unique, and that there's this appreciation that's been fostered to see this. I don't know, but I think it's a question that a lot of people are asking in anything from city planning to church music. Yes, sir.
In a multi-generational context where you have people who might prefer something old, and some might prefer something new, and then this group you mentioned that prefers a diversity of expression.
Yeah.
Is it possible within that same group of people at the same time and place to have an expression or expressions that can be common for all these people and can be accessed to all these people?
Man, I have not seen it done often nor done well. And here's to me it feels like, well, I don't know. Again, it feels like there has been a change emotionally in everybody. It feels like that there has been this that the contention's not as great and as vehement as it initially was, right? So who knows what potential lies there? There's just been this generous attitude coming from older generations, and there's also been this generous attitude coming from younger generations, which is very, very different than where things started out, and that's really encouraging. So where it could go, hopefully what you're asking would be possible, but again, I've just yet to see something done that doesn't cause some types of compromise that are agitating at this point for both parties. Yes.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious what your takes are on this. I know you've been talking a lot about the melding of popular culture and church music, and there's definitely the sect of church music where there's you get your gospel and your traditional hymns and your contemporary stuff, which is very worship oriented. Then you also have now, in the last 60, 70 years, this emergence of stuff like Christian rap or Christian metal, or people taking old hymns and making them into jazz standards and stuff.
Yeah.
So I'm just kind of curious here, for those genres that are not so much oriented at worship, what do you see as their role in actual church function? Do you think they're just solely for edifying people, presenting the gospel in a new fashion?
It's been argued both. It's been argued from lots of different angles. I don't think that part of seems like the divide between sacred and secular has become much more furry and blurry than it was previously. You know, you're talking about the 60, 70 years, you're talking there. So the necessity of having an alternative to something, because that was a thing that drove that initially was, hey, we want to protect the morals of our children, and we can't allow them to be exposed to this moral decaying presentation, and we need an alternative. So I think that was what drove it initially. Now there's been people are much more prone to want to impact outside of the church with the music from a Christian vantage point. You've seen a lot of success in the last decade or so of that, which I feel like, to me, here's what it boils down to me. Do you want a guy proselytizing or offering edification who's most gifted at melody and hooks, musically speaking? Or do you think that's where we should get our content and where dogma should be exchanged, so to speak? I don't think so. And again, this is me talking about the shift from the hymn model to the pop music model. Pop music is really inadequate, I think, to express a lot of this stuff. Hymns, they would spend many years waiting and finding the right melody and chord structures, because the content and the lyric, the thing that was wanting to be communicated, was the most important, not the hook or the melody. In pop music, that stuff is sort of secondary. I think, and there's the My Humps Alanis thing. Did you see this on?
No.
Familiar with the My Humps song? It was about 3 or 4 years ago. And Alanis did a cover of it where she's just singing the lyrics, and it just sounds like, are you kidding me? This is like the song we all gobbled up, because when the lyrics are in front of you, you go, wow, that is really interesting. Yes, I just think pop music is just not, it's not where you turn for intellectual, philosophical discourse. So why have those people trying to edify us? Not that they haven't occasionally stumbled on a few things. That was me. Yes.
My question isn't about church music. I was just wondering, how did the David Crowder Band become such a big name in Christian music? How did it go from worship and Waco, Texas to, everyone knows that you like your albums?
Okay. Wow, I wish it was everyone. And keyword by. It really is due to the songs, writing songs, with the songs, being that UBC is very transient in its population, the songs would travel back home with the students to their settings, to camp in the summer, and all these different locations. Eventually, we found ourselves sort of following the songs around, trying to figure out what is our responsibility to these things, how can we best carry them in a delicate manner. At some point along the way, we got a call from the EMI folks, which Billy Ray Hearn is part of, and we developed a relationship through publishing. They were putting some of these songs in different compilation settings, and other artists were recording them. And I was quite skeptical at first, and really afraid to let go of these things and let them be championed by what I viewed as industry commerce, and that seemed like another confusing. I was already confused enough, and that seemed like another confusing place to stick myself. But relationship with these guys really disarmed me, because they're really, really great people, and their intent really, and genuinely at this point, after I've been in the thing for 10 years, really is to see the church served in however way they can serve the church. So that would be the only thing I can attribute it to. Is the songs got out and about, and for whatever reason, people have attached to them and felt like we're saying something on behalf of them. Maybe that just means they have similar aesthetics or something. I'm not sure, but yeah, I can't say how you feel. And again, you have to remember, Christian music it's a tiny, tiny pond in the scheme of culture. So we never really feel like we're we feel pretty tiny most of the time, because worship music, even a little segment of Christian music as a whole. So Christian music. Is that helpful at all, or is it useless?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Yeah,
Sure.
why not?
With a lot of contemporary music, a lot of times it takes a band. It takes, it's not just you as the drummer and bass player, the sound guy, which is huge, more than one maybe. Now, it seems like to the degree that would take on in all churches, that would need to suggest a paradigm shift of the structure of how we pay our pastors or worship leaders. And for a lot of churches to not be able to have, they can maybe pay for a pianist who also leads all the music and maybe a pastor. And we typically have a pastor who's full time, or something. Do you see a paradigm shift in the restructuring of like salaries or of leadership in more shared ministry from all around as a result of the band approach?
This is really good. In fact, we kind of touched on it briefly the other day, coming around with it. Yes, already that exists, but I don't know that it's a good thing, because what we're doing, I think this is what it indicates that we're doing, is, I think we ask, and this kind of is not that great to say in this room, but I think we ask too much of music sometimes, especially in the modern worship song movement, because what you're doing is you're trying to recapture this emotional thing that you experienced at one point, and you're trying to relive that deal. So you're always chasing that with a disposable thing to begin with, a pop song. So you're constantly. It's almost like you're feeding this this consumptive mentality. So when you shift salaries to say this is really important, which you can say it's really important, because if you have good production, you have a good band, you lots of times have more people in the seats. That's why there's this shift. But you're also saying, wow, this bit of music that's a really small thing that's deposited intellectually, philosophically, theologically, that's probably not where your people are getting most of their core beliefs about God, is through these little pop entities in a band, what you're describing. So, yes, you've already seen a shift, but I don't know that it's sort of unfortunate in my mind. I don't know what the answer is other than saying yes.
I think it was kind of opinion what your thought would be. You value the spoken word as maybe, as traditionally has been done, maybe more than.
Well, I value the relationship more than all of that. I think what we're trying to do is pull people into a lifelong journey of how do we become more like this person of Christ. And yes, presenting things verbally are really inspiring at times, and there's a lot of learning, and it can totally shift you. Same with the music, same with written prayer, verbalized scripture. All these things are really formative. But the thing that, to me, watching what happened, relationship is where this stuff really happens. And it's too where you feel and understand where your true affections lie. Because there's this posture that can happen easily in church settings that, we're good at that stuff. But when you're in relationship with people, the posturing tends to not be as possible. And then I think true formative moments can occur. So that would be what I would say. I would say what we're trying to do is value the relationships that we're facilitating. And how do we do that? Sometimes the music is a great front door to bring a lot of people in, but I would rather pay the guy that's in the week with all these people than the guy that's in an hour span. So that's what I'm saying. It seems unfortunate, but and two, the problem, when you had the music director who was in charge of all these choirs, his or her interaction is extended. Relationship is part of it. You're trying to pull the people of the church and find the gifts and allow them to be fostered and used. And so there's this transmission of faith that happens through that whole process. Life is, you're entwined. And the band leader, he's got, 4 or 5 guys that, it's just, it's a difference.
So the job description itself is intrinsically cliquish at some level?
Yeah, totally. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
So if you could dream of a model with no limits, and you were able to do all the things leadership or imagine all things, what would be an ideal model for church music? What would that
So basically, we're going to solve everything right here.
Just let us hear you dream.
Oh,
What might that look like? What could you imagine could be with no limitations?
That is. Let me think about that. I've never allowed myself the no limitations thing. I don't know. I'm not exactly sure because because I think part of my problem is I know that I'm coming from a place that still has issues. That there are still things that I'm trying to get over, and I know that I should be there and I'm not. And so when I dream, it would probably I would probably be unable to participate in the way I would want to participate. If that makes sense. So maybe that's part of my hurdle. And part of what's been amazing about you guys pulling me into this thing is to let my head get a little more room and space and see things in a broader way. And already issues that I've had been set to the side. So it's inspiring, but I'm useless there, man. I'm sorry. Let's go. Yeah.
Just a quick story. My roommate and I were sitting in Baylor Chapel freshman year, and with one of our other good friends who was telling us how much she hated hymns. And they started singing Come Thou Fount. Yeah. And she said, I just love this song. And she said, I just hate hymns. This song is just so great.
Yeah.
So my question is, with this big push recently for modern hymns, how do you go about modernizing hymns on your albums? Because that, I think, is one of your best things that you do is make hymns accessible. Because the theology is so deep that you already commented on. How do you go about modernizing hymns?
Tentatively, especially like the last album we had, 1,000 Tones on it. When you got Wesley telling you don't jack with my stuff, it's kind of hard to then start messing around with stuff. But yeah, I think it's just something that I've struggled with since being in a position of, hey, I'm supposed to say things on behalf of this group of people. Well, I want to pull them into the historic stream of things, and to do so, unfortunately, requires, I think, a little retooling. But it's no more difficult than just taking the song and sitting with the guitar for a while and figuring out how can it fit into some of the simplicity here. And at times it's a little difficult. At other times it's very simple. Not too difficult. A lot of another thing that not just myself, but a lot of people have found is just try to come up with some chorus tag that again if there's this moment of, oh my goodness, there's a lot here, and they can kind of collect themselves a little bit, and then we're back into, oh my goodness, there's a lot here. Oh, thank goodness we're back. I know I can sing this part. So I think there's that awareness of you're just trying to give handles so that people don't get too skittish and jet before they miss something that could be really beneficial. So there's that is a conscious thing. Yes.
A lot of times worship leaders tend to be really wordy and give little miniature sermonettes and stuff.
Yeah, they're not very good at that either.
And I noticed you tend to be kind of quiet, a few words when you leave.
Well, after this, you see why, right?
No, but sometimes they use this to give direction and things of that nature. What do you kind of see your role in that as a worship leader you're a facilitator?
I feel like that is probably a place I have a lot of growth available, because I've let fear dictate that posturing for myself, in the sense that, again, I feel like music's really a dangerous thing, to try to, because what you do a lot of times is you provoke this inauthentic response. And I got really nervous early on when the whole room looked the same in their posturing, because I felt like, wow, there's no possible way that we all came in this place with the same expectations, that our life has unfolded in a similar manner, and now we are ready to say these things. Granted, we can sing out of places of hope and make statements, wanting them to be true and wanting them to be so. But I think a lot of times what we're doing is really just asking for and begging for some sort of response, just because we want to feel like we're doing a good job, rather than allowing people to have a true, authentic, life-changing thing occur. And a phrase that stuck in my mind early on when I was trying to grasp at things, and how do I be okay when I see somebody who looks completely disinterested? How do I not feel the need to go there and provoke something? And it was a phrase I stumbled across. I don't have any idea where it is, but a soul can dance in a body that's still, but there's no telling what's going on internally. So tons of moments along the way that has proven to be true. I'll talk to somebody after a deal that looked like they would rather be any place on the planet than in the room with me at the time. And then they would tell me how incredible that experience was, and how it reshaped them in some fashion. So yeah, that's sort of what's going on in here, and why there's not a lot that comes out of here. Outside of, I feel really okay with humor and provoking response that's not necessarily spiritual posturing, although I feel like the reason I'm able to do that is because I absolutely believe it's spiritual posturing, that everything you do is spiritual and sacred. But yet, for the people I'm asking the response from, for the most part, there's not that shift to the segment of spirituality that's typically present. Yeah.
You all have a goal to create music that not only transcends Christian genre, but a person might just happen to hear your song and goes, wow, it really allowed me to think about God. And if so, how do you see yourself within it?
Well, this sort of this answer might be tying a little bit to the one before. But I think one thing we are conscious of, more so at times than other, well, we're always conscious of it, but sometimes we try to lean in terms of language, that we have language that's not incredibly loaded, that the imagery isn't something that's confined and really specific to a person who is in a church setting. The other side of it is just using music as fully as we are able to use music. I think if you can make music compelling and good is not the right word. Here would be part of the other thing that's going on in my head. There shouldn't, because of music being so incredibly suited for pulling at the human, to pull emotion from the human, then to me, if you have to say a lot of things to provoke some sort of response, I would think maybe you're not using music successfully, because that's what it does. I mean, you can go in any setting where music's happening and see humans respond to it in a very overt way. Yet you go into a church setting lots of times, and it's not so overt lots of times. And I think that means that maybe you're not using either the right type of music or the right. I just think maybe you're not using music that effectively. So what we try to do is compose music that would be compelling to people regardless of what content was. And then when you realize that, oh my goodness, these people think they're singing to God, that's weird. That's been a fun thing to watch occur. because ours is, I mean, the lyrics are obviously overt, and it's really clear that we're not trying to sneak onto the pop scene through the back door or anything, and then go, ha, we're Christians. Which happens quite a bit. Yeah. I don't know, I sort of did. So you want some more?
Having been involved in worship leading the last couple of years, I've noticed as part of the whole traditional contemporary conflict, there's almost like there's this tension of between being a performer who typically gets all kinds of cute accolades and praise versus the music minister up front with the hymnal who probably only hears about it when it hangs with Allie. How do you guys deal with that tension? How do you deal with that tension? I mean, I always kind of felt like before, like the implied instruction from the person in charge of us has been, do your best for God. That's important. Do your best for God. But don't let your fingers move too fast so you don't use the fullness of what your hand is capable of because you might overly glorify yourself. How do you wrestle with that?
Yes, I've heard this a lot. Again, I think that the person who is in front on Sunday morning or when your role is to facilitate the group singing or responding, then as soon as you prevent that, you're not doing good at what your role is, right? So that can be, I mean, it can be doing that, I guess, but for the most part, it's are you allowing this community of believers to sing to God, or are you hitting that in some sense? And I don't know, it seems pretty simple because you can look and see. Is there anything that's getting in the way, or is there not anything that's getting in the way? And it is, we'll figure out what it is and move it to the side. That's helpful.
Yeah.
Yes. Sorry, I was thinking about this. Yes. Oh, yes.
Okay. A lot of critics are saying today that like Christian stars need to kind of water down their message and not say Jesus outright and not really describe God too much, so they can attract more believers, or like non-believers, into the church. What would you say to those critics?
That at times that might be. Some people might have an issue initially and encounter and fall in love with a song and then realize that it's coming from a Christian worldview or Christian narrative. But what I find most of the time happens is they're, like I said, kind of joked earlier, they kind of get upset that it was a little sneaky, that, man, if I'd have known that, I would have probably not given it the time of day. But that's enlightening in the sense that, well, if it was overt, then would you have given it the time of day? So I don't know. I kind of, I don't know. That's very difficult because I can see the usefulness of it, and you've seen success because of it. And you've seen a lot of people that would probably say, yeah, if I wouldn't have fallen in love with that band, I would not be in love with God today. But no, I didn't know they were Christian, and kind of even mad at them for a while. But man, that's a good song. I've heard that story. I've also heard a lot of distrust has been built among music critics because of that very thing. That music critics now are much more astute at finding out what's the deal with these people, where were they before they arrived on my desk, and if they are trying to be a little subversive, they'll just have their way with them.